I woke up to the sound of something scraping against my porch. It was 5 in the morning. The sun hadn't even risen yet. I rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe it was just the old pine tree scratching against the gutter again. But then I heard a deep, heavy breath, like someone exhaling right outside my door. I pulled on my jeans, threw on my flannel shirt, and walked barefoot across the cold wooden floor. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst through my ribs. I reached for the door handle and paused. There it was again, that low, vibrating exhale. I pushed the door open a few inches and froze. There, standing not even a full foot away from me, was a snow leopard. She was massive. Her head alone looked bigger than my entire chest. Her paws were wide and powerful, pressed against the porch boards. She stared at me with those pale, glassy eyes that seemed to reflect the dim light of dawn. For a moment, my mind went blank. I didn't even breathe. If I moved, would she lunge at me? Would she tear me apart right here in front of my own house? My knees were trembling so badly I had to grip the door frame to stay upright. But then I saw it. Her ribs. They were sticking out so far under her spotted fur I could count every single one of them. Her shoulders looked sunken, her face was narrow, and there was a dry crust around her nose. She wasn't here to attack me. She was starving. That realization hit me so hard I almost fell backwards. I had seen hungry stray dogs, thin coyotes, even a weak fox once in winter. But never in my life had I seen a predator like her look so close to death. I swallowed hard. What was I supposed to do? Close the door and pretend I hadn't seen her? Call someone to come shoot her before she attacked livestock in the valley? Just watch her die in the woods? My eyes burned as I blinked. I thought about the freezer in my garage. Last month, my brother Mark had given me 2 deer hindquarters from his hunting trip. They'd been sitting there ever since because I never got around to processing them. My heart was thundering so hard it felt like I might faint, but I forced myself to move. I closed the door slowly, trying not to spook her. I ran to the garage, flicked on the old fluorescent light, and grabbed one of the heavy frozen slabs of meat. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it onto my foot. When I stepped back out onto the porch, she was still there. She hadn't moved an inch. Just watched the door, waiting. Her breath came in slow, rattling pulls, like every inhale was an effort. I set the meat down on the edge of the porch. My entire body was tense. I backed away, keeping my eyes on her. She lowered her head, sniffed it once, then looked up at me. Our eyes locked, and in that moment, I felt like I was looking into something ancient and sacred. A creature that wasn't supposed to be here, begging me without a sound. She grabbed the meat with her huge jaws, lifted it as if it weighed nothing, and turned silently towards the trees. I watched her disappear into the pine shadows, her long tail curling behind her like a wisp of smoke. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling, hearing her breath in my head over and over again, wondering where she would go, wondering if she would survive. At dawn, just as I finally started to drift off, I heard it again, scratching, right outside my door. I didn't move for a long moment. That scratching outside my door sounded desperate, like nails dragging against wood with no rhythm. I sat up in bed, feeling my chest tighten. It was barely morning, the gray light just beginning to seep through the cracks of my blinds. I pulled on my boots, grabbed my phone from the nightstand, and slowly walked to the front door. My fingers were trembling so badly, I almost dropped the phone. I took a deep breath and opened the door. There she was again. The snow leopard stood on my porch, her fur damp from the morning dew. But this time, she wasn't alone. Hanging from her mouth by the scruff was a tiny cub, no bigger than a house cat. Its legs dangled, and its eyes blinked sleepily at me. Behind her, I saw movement. 2 more little cubs stood on the dirt just beyond the porch. They looked around nervously, pressing against each other's sides for comfort. I felt my heart drop straight into my stomach. She set the cub down gently at her paws and looked at me, not with aggression, not with fear, but with a deep, silent plea. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I swear I saw tears building up in my own. I whispered without thinking, "What are you doing, girl? What are you doing here with them?" The cub she carried let out a tiny whimpering sound, almost like a kitten crying. Its front leg bent at an odd angle. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Was it broken? Sprained? Infected? My brain started racing through options. I didn't know how to treat wild animals, but I knew someone who did. I quickly unlocked my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Brian Vet. Brian was an old college friend who now worked at a wildlife rehab center 40 miles away. My hands were shaking so bad it took me 3 tries to hit call. He answered after 2 rings, his voice groggy. "Hey man, you know it's 6 a.m., right? Brian, listen to me. I need your help. There's a snow leopard on my porch." Silence. "A snow leopard? John, what the hell are you talking about?" "I'm serious. She's here. She came yesterday, and I gave her some deer meat. Now she's back with 3 cubs. One of them is hurt." I heard his sheets rustling as he sat up. "Okay, first of all, don't go near her. Don't open the door fully. She could be dangerous, especially with babies around." "Brian, she's looking right at me. She's not growling. She's just asking me for help. I can see it. John, listen to me carefully. I know you feel that way, but this is a wild animal. She could kill you without even meaning to. You have to stay inside until I get there." I swallowed hard, staring at her massive paws as she shifted her weight. The little cub with the bent leg let out another weak cry. My chest felt like it was splitting open. "Brian, please, can you come here? Bring whatever you need to help a cub with a broken leg." He sighed on the other end. "I'll grab a field kit and be there as soon as I can. Don't do anything stupid until I arrive, okay?" He hung up before I could answer. I lowered the phone and watched as the mother sat down on her haunches, her tail curling protectively around the injured cub. The other 2 pressed against her sides, their little spotted heads peeking out around her thick fur. I wanted to step forward. Every part of me was screaming to kneel down and comfort them. But I stayed where I was, gripping the doorframe until my knuckles turned white. Outside, the forest was waking up. Birds chirped in the distance. A breeze moved through the pine branches, carrying the smell of damp earth and new spring growth. But all I could focus on was the snow leopard's eyes, never leaving mine. A silent conversation passed between us. She didn't roar. She didn't growl. She just waited. Trusted. And that trust broke something open in me I didn't even know was still closed. I heard Brian's words echo in my mind. If this is a wild mother, she could attack at any second. But I couldn't turn away. Brian's truck rumbled up my dirt driveway, just as the sun rose over the pines. I saw his silhouette behind the wheel, and my stomach twisted when I noticed the long gun case propped up on the passenger seat. He parked, stepped out, and grabbed the case before shutting the door. His eyes went immediately to the snow leopard and her cubs on my porch. "Jesus, John, you weren't kidding." I clenched my fists so hard my nails bit into my palms. "Why the hell did you bring a gun?" Brian kept his eyes on the big cat as he walked slowly toward me. "Because it's a snow leopard, John. It could kill you in 2 seconds if it decides you're a threat." I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. My voice shook with anger. "She's not going to hurt anyone. Look at her. She's half dead herself." Brian set the gun case down by his boots, but didn't open it. He raised his hands in surrender. "All right, let me see the cub." He crouched slightly to get a better look. The mother lowered her head, a deep growl vibrating in her chest as soon as his eyes met hers. The sound rumbled through the wooden porch boards under my feet. "Easy," Brian whispered, holding still. He glanced up at me. "She trusts you, not me." I swallowed hard and stepped forward. My legs felt like water. The mother's gaze flicked to me, and her growl softened. I knelt down slowly, my knees popping against the boards. "Hey there, girl." The injured cub whimpered again, its little paw bent unnaturally under its body. I could see it was swelling badly now. A thin line of dried blood clung to its fur. Brian whispered behind me, "If it's broken, John, we have to splint it or the bone will set wrong. But I can't do that here. We need to take it to the center." My chest tightened. I looked at the cub, then at the mother. Her tail flicked anxiously, but she didn't move away. Brian spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "We have to take it, John. It'll die if we don't." I turned to glare at him. "And what happens when you take it? Huh? You think she'll just let you walk away with her baby? She'll follow you. She'll go crazy trying to get it back." Brian ran a hand over his face, sighing. "I know. That's why we sedate her, take the cub, treat it, and release them back together." My blood ran cold at the word sedate. The mother was watching us both so closely. I could see the trust in her eyes, trust she didn't have for Brian. Only me. I shook my head. There has to be another way. Brian's eyes hardened. "If you care about this cub, you'll let me do my job." Silence fell over the porch. The 2 uninjured cubs huddled behind their mother's back legs, wide-eyed and trembling. The injured one let out another broken little cry that tore something inside me open. I looked up at Brian, feeling tears burn my eyes. Give me a minute. I knelt there, breathing in the damp morning air, staring into the mother's eyes. She shifted her weight, her massive shoulder brushing my arm. I could feel the deep rumble of her breath vibrating through her chest. She leaned forward, her huge head lowering until her nose almost touched my knee. I didn't move. Then, with a sudden snarl, she lunged sideways and slammed her shoulder into Brian's chest, knocking him back into the porch railing. My heart stopped. She turned back to me, her massive face inches from mine, her breath hot and wet against my cheek. My hands were trembling as her breath warmed my cheek. She stood there, inches away, her massive body tense but unmoving. I could hear Brian shifting behind me, trying to stand up without making sudden noises. I whispered softly, "It's okay, girl, it's okay." Her eyes were locked onto mine, deep, gray, and filled with something I couldn't name. Fear? Trust? Desperation? Maybe all of them at once. Slowly, I reached out my shaking hand and let it hover near the injured cub. She didn't move, just watched. Her breathing was heavy, ragged, as if each inhale pulled years of exhaustion through her lungs. My fingers brushed the cub's tiny side. It flinched and let out a soft mewl of pain. My heart shattered at the sound. I gently slid my hands under its small body, lifting it off the porch boards. The cub was warm and trembling, its tiny claws curling into my flannel sleeve. Brian's voice was quiet behind me. "Bring it over here, John." I turned, cradling the cub against my chest. The mother let out a low rumble, but didn't follow. Her massive tail flicked once across the porch as she sat back on her haunches, her eyes never leaving me. I carried the cub over to Brian, who had opened his field kit. He pulled on a pair of blue latex gloves and gently examined the little leg. The cub whimpered again, and I felt tears stinging my eyes. "It's a bad break," Brian said quietly, "but it's clean. We can splint it here, give it some antibiotics, and see how it heals over the next few days." I nodded, barely breathing as he worked. His hands moved quickly, wrapping the tiny leg in gauze and then splinting it with a thin metal brace from his kit. The cub squirmed weakly but didn't fight. When he was done, Brian looked up at me. "It'll need a safe, dry place to rest. Somewhere warm, away from predators or cold nights." I looked back at the mother. She was still sitting there, watching us. Her ears were pricked forward, her gaze locked onto her cub. "She trusts me," I whispered. "She's letting me do this." Brian sighed and wiped sweat from his brow despite the cool air. "I've never seen anything like it, man. She'd tear me apart if I tried. But with you, it's like she knows." I felt something shift deep in my chest. A sense of responsibility, heavy and terrifying. "I can't just leave them out here, Brian. She's starving. Her babies are starving. They need shelter, food, safety." Brian started to protest, but I raised my hand. "No, listen, I can build something. I have all that lumber from the old shed I tore down last fall. I can make a shelter for them in the corner of the yard, somewhere hidden from the road but close enough that I can watch them." Brian stared at me for a long moment before nodding. "If anyone can pull this off, it's you." I carried the cub back to its mother. She stood as I approached, her huge paws shifting on the boards. Gently, I knelt down and laid the little one at her feet. She sniffed its fur, then pressed her nose to its tiny cheek, letting out a soft, rumbling purr that vibrated through the air. The two other cubs crowded around their sibling, nuzzling it and sniffing its new bandages. I stepped back, wiping my eyes on my sleeve. For a moment, I just stood there watching them, breathing in the smell of pine sap and damp earth carried on the morning breeze. The air felt alive, charged with something I couldn't name. Brian packed up his kit and slung it over his shoulder. "I'll come back tomorrow to check on it. But John, be careful. If she thinks you're a threat, even for a second." "I know," I said quietly, "but I don't think she will." That evening, I spent hours hauling old boards and beams from the shed ruins to the back corner of my yard near the tree line. I hammered together a small three-sided lean-to, lining it with leftover roofing tarps to keep the wind out. I scattered straw on the ground for warmth, then set out a bucket of water and what was left of the deer meat in a shallow pan. As I worked, I felt muscles in my back burn from the weight of each plank. Sweat dripped down my temples despite the cool spring air. Every few minutes, I glanced back at the porch where the mother lay curled around her cubs, her eyes tracking my every move. By the time the sun set, I was exhausted. I walked back into the house, my arms trembling from work, and sat by the window. Through the glass, I watched as the snow leopard led her cubs into their new shelter. She curled around them, her massive tail covering their little bodies. The porch boards still smelled of pine sap and blood. The wind rustled through the trees, rattling the metal roofing of the lean-to softly like distant thunder. I pressed my forehead to the window and let the tears come. I didn't know if I was crying from exhaustion, fear, or something deeper I couldn't name. All I knew was that I was responsible for them now. I wasn't sure if I could ever go back to the way things were before. I couldn't imagine waking up to an empty porch, no sound of claws tapping against wood, no soft growls vibrating the morning air. As darkness swallowed the forest outside, I stayed by the window, watching her chest rise and fall with sleep. The cubs curled tighter against her, their tiny bodies disappearing under her thick fur. I whispered to the glass, "Don't worry, girl. I've got you now." The next morning, I woke up to flashing lights outside. Police cars, parked at the end of my driveway. The red and blue lights flashed through my bedroom window, casting bright streaks across the ceiling. My stomach twisted into a hard knot as I pulled on my boots and stumbled to the front door. I stepped out onto the porch, the morning air crisp and biting against my flushed skin. 2 police cruisers were parked at the end of my driveway, engines humming quietly. A tall deputy stepped out, placing his hat on as he walked towards me with careful, measured steps. Another officer stood by the car, speaking into his radio, eyes scanning the tree line. "Morning, sir," the deputy called out, glancing past me towards the lean-to shelter I built near the pines. "We got some calls from neighbors about a large animal on your property." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice not to shake. "She's not hurting anyone. She's staying here with her cubs until they're strong enough to leave." His eyebrows raised slightly. "Sir, with all due respect, it's a snow leopard. It's a protected species, but it's also dangerous. Wildlife Services is on their way. They'll need to assess the situation." Behind him, I saw a third vehicle pull up, this one marked State Wildlife. A woman in a brown uniform stepped out, carrying a clipboard and wearing a sidearm at her hip. She looked tired, wary, but professional. "Are you John Carter?" she asked as she approached. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Officer Lillian Hayes with State Wildlife. Neighbors reported a snow leopard and 3 cubs near your house. We're here to make sure everyone is safe, including them." I felt my chest tighten so hard it hurt to breathe. "Please, just give them a few more days. One of the cubs is injured. My friend, a vet, he treated it yesterday. It just needs time to heal before they move again." She wrote something down on her clipboard, glancing over at the shelter where I could see the mother curled around her babies, watching us silently. "Mr. Carter, these animals aren't native here. They're likely escapees from an illegal breeder or private collection. We can't just leave them. They need proper care, evaluation, and relocation." I clenched my fists at my sides. "If you try to take them today, she'll fight you. She trusts me. Please, let me help them for a few more days. I promise I'll cooperate with whatever you decide after that." Officer Hayes studied me quietly. Her eyes softened just a fraction. "We'll need to keep an officer posted nearby, for public safety. But if your vet friend is willing to check in daily and keep reports for us, I'll give you 72 hours. After that, they're coming with us." "Thank you," I whispered, my voice cracking. The officers left an hour later, after inspecting the perimeter and confirming the cats were contained near the shelter. Brian arrived mid-morning, carrying fresh antibiotics and gauze. He shook his head as he looked around at the tire tracks in my yard. "Quite the morning, huh? You have no idea," I muttered. We treated the little cub again, changing its bandages and checking the swelling. The mother stayed close by, her massive head brushing against my arm every so often, as if reassuring herself that I was still there. The day passed in quiet work. I cleaned out the shelter, adding fresh straw and another tarp to block the western wind. I chopped leftover venison and set it out in small pieces, watching as the cubs ate clumsily, their tiny tails twitching with each bite. At noon, I sat on an overturned bucket near them, sipping cold coffee from a chipped mug. The forest around us buzzed with late spring insects. Blue jays flitted between branches overhead, their calls sharp against the stillness. For a long while, I just watched them, the mother licking each cub clean, rolling them gently with her massive paws. The injured one stayed close to her chest, but its eyes were bright, its little nose twitching as it sniffed the breeze. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the clearing, I spread out an old blanket near the shelter and sat down. The mother watched me for a moment, then rose from her spot. My breath caught as she walked over, silent and graceful despite her size. She lowered herself beside me. Her fur brushed against my leg, heavy and warm. Then, slowly, she rested her head on my lap. I froze, afraid to even breathe. Her eyes closed, and she let out a deep sigh, her entire body relaxing against mine. I set my hand gently on her broad head, feeling the heat radiating through her fur, feeling the steady thrum of her pulse beneath my palm. In that moment, everything fell away. The fear, the exhaustion, the questions about tomorrow. All that existed was this creature, trusting me completely, and her 3 little cubs curled up nearby in the fading light. A tear slipped down my cheek and landed in her fur. I whispered softly, "You're safe here, for as long as I can keep you safe." I sat there long after the sun had disappeared behind the trees, the sky deepening into navy blue, the first stars flickering to life overhead. She didn't move. Neither did I. I knew tomorrow could bring anything: relocation, confrontation, heartbreak. But as her breathing evened out in sleep, her head still heavy on my legs, I felt peace for the first time in years. I realized that helping them, it was the best decision I'd ever made. Whether they stayed 1 more day or 100, I would be here. And I prayed silently into the night that when the time came to say goodbye, she would know I never once saw her as just an animal. She was family,